Good morning, everybody. We are live. Congratulations. You made it through the work week and it's Friday. And thank you for joining us for this food safety chat. My name is Brian Armitrout with the Food Leadership Group. And if you're new to the chat, what we're doing here every week at this time, 8 a.m. Mountain, 10 a.m. Eastern, we live stream and talk about food safety. And what you'll notice is this is not a presentation. This is not a bunch of PowerPoint slides and us lecturing to you. This is us having a conversation around the topic. And I love this because we get some amazing guests on here with just the knowledge these guests have. So Dr. Marshall, who's joining us today, has probably forgotten more things than I've ever learned. So it's always great to have him on. And one of the rituals we love to talk about here in the beginning is let us know where you're at in the world. So I am in Loveland, Colorado, and it's going to be a very windy day here today for sure. And Doug lives in this neck of the woods, but judging from his environment there, which appears to be a hotel room, he is not in Colorado. He's at a undisclosed bunker.
Yeah, somewhere near Chicago.
Oh, lovely, lovely, lovely. I'm sure it's very nice. But so Doug is with Eurofins, where he is, gosh, what's your title now? You are the Chief
Scientific Officer.
CSO, the Chief Scientific Officer for Eurofins North America. And one of the things, I know this will kind of embarrass Doug a little bit, but one of the things that's great about Doug is a lot of times when you have someone with an incredible wealth of academic knowledge, being able to translate that into real world applications and using that in your plants and helping you to design systems and looking at things a different way. He is a master at helping people out, which is one of the reasons you see him in a hotel room outside Chicago, because that's what he's up to. So we greatly appreciate this time. And so far, the internet connection has been great. So that's a good thing. So Cheryl's there. So Cheryl's in your neck of the wood. Always good to see Cheryl here. Good morning. Abdul, nice to see you. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. Frank is in Alma, Missouri. Not sure where Alma is. I used to spend quite a bit of time in the Joplin area in Springfield with clients there, but I'm not familiar with where that is. So thanks for joining us. It's kind of a weird time here in Colorado. If you're from the area out here, March is the snowiest month, and this month has kind of been hit or miss. So we're kind of preparing for what's going to happen in April. And when you get late snows here, the leaves start coming out and things like that. It can really cause a ton of damage. So hopefully none of that happens. Claire, thanks for joining us. So if you're new to the chat, one of the things that we do on here is we all kind of have a sip of your favorite beverage and join us for that. So cheers, everyone. You have a lovely paper cup from the hotel. I'm assuming that's water.
Water with a shot of vodka.
There you go. Kara, good morning from good old Wisconsin. Nice to see you. I was flying through Utah yesterday, and pretty good snow out there in Utah. So hopefully that's coming to the ski resorts. I'm sure they would appreciate it. So let's dive into today's topic. So this is a really cool one because and when Doug and I were preparing for this earlier in the week, there was a saying that came to mind from a friend who said, if you're coasting, that means you're going downhill. Right? There is no static state in what we do. Either you are improving, sharpening your saw, creating new skills, learning new things, or you're declining. There's no in between. So a big chunk of that we wanted to talk about is that continuous improvement piece and what it is to do that you can go out there and do these type of activities. And really within your career, there's kind of different groups that you can work with outside of your company and different groups that kind of pop up along the way as you're doing these things. And one of the biggest threats, Doug, that I've seen out there for someone's career in food safety and quality is kind of locking yourself in your office at the plant or corporate or whatever and just relying on what you've learned in the past, because you're going to get caught pretty quick.
Yeah, and the whole topic of this series is leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And in food safety and food quality leadership, those that are followers, they're the ones that are going to get surprised in their job because they're going to find something that's out of control and they won't know what to do about it. And
Right.
So being able to absorb best practices from every possible angle you can get that information from is going to make you much better in your job. It's going to ensure you have job security. It's going to make your employer happy because there will be drama in the facility, but how you manage that drama is key to, number one, being able to sleep well at night,
Uh,
but number two, being able to advance your career.
yeah, boy, that was perfectly said. Because one of the things that I always did in my career, so I've had, different jobs where people reported to me and things like this in my past. And I would always build into people's objectives. There are kind of three categories I would look at. There's what are the objectives of the department and the company that we're working within? So how can we help support those? What are the job description? What are the things that you need to be doing just to kind of stay in that steady state? So if you're in QA and food safety, complaint rates and downtime and all those different things that we monitor, audits, recalls, these type of things, that's all great. But if you're not developing and growing, to your point, you're going to fall behind. So one of the things I would always put in the objectives for my team members over the course of the year, me included, I would do this too, is I would ask them, it's like, okay, we've set aside money in the budget for training and growth. What do you want to do? Because just doing your job is not enough. We have to take our division and what we're doing to that next level. So do you want to learn about computer skills? Are you kind of not too good in Word and Excel or what have you? What conferences would you like to attend over the course of the year? And I would let them go out and figure out what it was that fit into the objectives of the company and what it is that we wanted to do. And I was always, every single time, people would come back with just amazing ideas. And I'm like, yep, absolutely. Check. Here you go. And then we would make sure that those things got followed off on by the end of the year.
Yeah, and I think where we want to go today is, as an individual, you have discretionary expenses just to keep your personal career and your personal brand going.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I've been a very, very strong advocate of is investing your dollars in your own personal growth. And one easy way to do that is by participating in professional organizations that have some relationship to your job function. So for those of us in food quality and food safety, these organizations are going to be things like the International Association for Food Protection or the Institute of Food Technologists. And there are a whole host of trade associations that put specific focus on commodity products and manufactured products that you are making. And so being a member of these trade associations gives you an orbit of experts that you can call on whenever you want to learn something new about something that's highly relevant to your particular job task today. And, these memberships, some people might say, well, I don't have a discretionary $300 sitting around. And in fact, you do. And doing that annual membership and keeping it active, you get access to online blogs, you get access to white papers that trade associations put together by their members and outside experts to be able to provide best practices to those of you who are working in those sectors. So it's a very, very easy investment to give you access to all kinds of information that will make you a better person.
Right. And on that side as well, too, is that information, but also those connections that you make and the people that you meet and things like this who can help you. Because the odds are the problem that you're experiencing in your operations and in your facilities, other people have experienced those too in your field. So finding out what they've done to help fix those and correct those things is only going to accelerate your improvement in those operations. And as I've often said on here as well, Doug, the point in time of when you need a food safety lawyer is not when you need them. It's before you need them. You need to set up those relationships and see those perspectives. It's something we talk about here on the chat all the time. Is food safety is not a point of competition. So if you're working in produce or you're working in dairy or beef or refrigerated foods, which we're going to talk about here as well, you need to have those connections because they're going through the same things you are, and being able to see what other people have done and have access to that information, dividends unfold immediately when you do that. And that $300 membership seems pretty paltry in comparison to what you get out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then kind of the next evolutionary step of getting access to people who are just like you is not only the career development, but also there is a tremendous amount of personal satisfaction you can gain by
Oh,
volunteering for activities associated with these groups. Because this is a way for you to have influence over a market sector, for example, to be able to push an agenda that's beneficial to not only you as an individual and a professional, but also beneficial to the company you are affiliated with and perhaps everybody else in that industry sector. And
mhm.
so when you think about individuals that have brand name recognition out there in food quality and food safety, how did they earn that brand recognition? Was it just because they worked hard and their company valued them? No, because the only people who knew anything of value about that person was their employer. So once you get out and start interacting with other experts, not only do you absorb their knowledge by osmosis, but you also have a chance to give back to others who are coming into the field. And so being a volunteer and a service mentor is incredibly useful to you, both in terms of your personal well being, because giving is one of the best emotional things you can do. And when you give back to trade associations and professional societies, everybody who's a member is going to benefit from your volunteer activity.
Oh, absolutely. That reciprocity is absolutely amazing and pays dividends far beyond what you contribute. And it even gives you opportunities then once you're interacting with these people in these groups and you're getting to know each other and becoming friends and these type of things, opportunities start opening up as well. So, hey, Doug, we have a conference coming up here within our group. Would you like to be a speaker? Or would you like to present some data at this conference on some of the things that you've learned in your career? It's an amazing way to get out there and network.
Mhm. And another networking opportunity I would encourage folks to do is intermingle with your vendors.
Mm.
Don't treat them like just a transactional organization. Treat them like a member of your family, because you can't do the job you need to do without the support of your vendors. And so
Yeah.
choosing vendors that have, you talked about reciprocity. Choose vendors that also want to give back to you other than just selling you a cheap commodity product or a cheap commodity service.
Exactly. And so a great example of that is sanitation. Working really closely. I mean, the people who supply your chemicals are not just your chemical supplier. They are helping you to develop your CIP systems, your COP systems, helping you create work instructions and training your team. And guess what? When FDA shows up at your facility and says, okay, great, this is a very nice food safety plan. We would like to look at your preventive controls around sanitation and walk us through how you validated these processes. And a lot of people, when that happens, panic. And they're like, oh, what do you mean validate? Well, yeah. How do you know that this time, temperature, cycle, flow rate, and all these type of parameters that go into that are effective? Well, I don't have any finished product problems. Nope, that's not going to work. FDA is not going to be happy with that answer. And those sanitation companies that you're working with and the chemical companies, that's what they do. That's their expertise. And you really, really need to plug into that because they're the ones helping you to validate your process.
Yeah. Let's see. Another thing is you touched on this too, Brian, and that's lifetime friends.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if you volunteer for your homeowners association, you volunteer to read books at Sunday school. It doesn't matter. What
Mhm.
Once you get out there and you start making these connections, you will find people that you really like, you
Uh-huh.
love to hang out with, and you really look forward to the next time you can get together. It could be someone
Mhm.
local, could be someone in your neighborhood, could be someone on the other side of the planet. But these individuals, you can have really cool conversations with them at a breakfast, at a hotel, at the cocktail lounge, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But it's just these constant connections. And the beauty of the internet and social media is you can connect with these folks very frequently now,
Yeah.
rather than waiting for some annual meeting to pop up and say, hey, you're going to be there. Yeah, okay, well, let's do something.
Yeah, exactly. And you and I sitting here talking right now is a perfect example of this. So over the years, you and I have, connected in various levels and doing different things, and we've now become friends. And as part of that, I know, and this works both ways. is that if I have an issue, I can pick up the phone anytime and ask you questions, and vice versa, right? We're going to help each other out. And one of the things that you find in your career, if you're working in food safety and quality assurance, is we work in a very, very small world. We have a hyper-focused niche activity that we do. No one goes to school to do what we do. You have a background and you have expertise in microbiology or these type of things, and then you go down this career path. And other people are going through that as well. And building those relationships is amazing. There are people, and this is one of the things that I'm most proud of in my career, I'm sure you are too, is what I've done is fine, that's all great, but it's really the people that I've been able to help and mentor and grow, and who are now themselves in senior leadership positions in companies. And I just love that, right? It's helping to bring things along because, and this is something that Darren Detweiler and I talked about on a chat not long ago. We've had, 30 years of food safety innovation and growth since the Jack in the Box outbreak. What's going to happen in the next 30 years? We are influencing that right now. We don't want this information to be lost and wither away. And the only way you do that is through building these connections. You're talking about houses, and it reminded me of a saying that I heard recently as well too. The point in time that you get to know your next door neighbor is not when your house is on fire.
Good point.
Yeah.
And remember too that your neighbor might just plow your driveway for you just because they like you.
Absolutely. And take care of your dog when you're out of town, and make sure that no one's creeping around the back of the house when they shouldn't be, and all these things. Mm-hmm. There's all kinds of activities that take place in those areas at that level. One of the most satisfying activities that I had in my career was when I was involved with GMA, which is now CBA, the Consumer Brands Association at the time, GMA. And we had a working group, and this is when FSMA was being developed. And a lot of people don't necessarily understand this process. So Congress creates a law, and it's written pretty abstractly. We require FDA to do this under the law. And that's all it says. Now it's handed to FDA and says, okay, now FDA, you need to write the regulations of how this works. And this is where trade associations and groups like that come into play. So I was part of a working group in GMA that was involved with helping FDA write the regulations for foreign supplier verification. And there was people on that group I was representing Dean Foods, and there was groups in there from Nestle and Kellogg's and all these different world famous, giant companies, and all that expertise. And we would have meetings, and we would go through, and phone calls and Zoom meetings and all these type of things that come up with those regulations. And then there was that back and forth process with FDA. So we would then work with them and say, okay, here is our recommendations of some of the things that you need to be putting into these regulations as you're moving forward. And I was part of the group then that was presenting to FDA. And Sharon Mayle, as many people in food safety know, was part of FDA at that time and one of the leads on that. She's now in private practice, and building those connections. And I call on those type of connections and those activities all the time. It was an incredibly valuable experience.
Yeah, I want to give you an example where you can get really useful information rather easily. Because this is a question I get asked every week, usually multiple times during that week. And that is, I want to put together microbiological specifications for my product and my process. What numbers should I choose as my limits? And apparently this is this gigantic mystery that we have in this industry where nobody knows what population of aerobic plate count microorganisms should be a tolerance limit for an Oreo cookie manufacturer or a sausage manufacturer or a bottled water manufacturer or a dietary supplements manufacturer. And when people ask experts like whoever you want to look at, you can look at me today, but my answer is usually, well, it depends. What are you trying to manage with the specification limit on a quantitative microbiology indicator test? Is it a product? Is it an ingredient? Is it the environment? Are you trying to meet a customer's expectation, or are you trying to use it for your expectation? So you have all these influences on the right answer. And without knowing all those details, coming to a right answer is oftentimes really hard to do.
Mhm.
But if you get on the phone and talk to somebody who's in your line of business and just say, "Hey, Ralph, what kind of spec limits do you have on the M&Ms you use in your cookies?" Ralph's probably going to tell you, because it's not a competitive advantage one way or another to have to share your spec limit. Um, or you can go to your trade association and say, "Do you have a white paper on setting spec limits for products in this narrower category?" So you can get answers pretty quickly to a question that seems to be impossible to answer by experts. Now, they might throw numbers at you because that's what they expect um, their client to want as a deliverable. It's like when you go to your physician and you have something that's ailing you, you're going to be unhappy if you leave that office without a prescription. Well, asking someone for a spec limit, some people want numbers, and it's really sometimes difficult to give numbers without a lot of intimate knowledge of the product and the process.
Yeah, exactly. And now think about the amount of work you would have to do internally to replicate that. You would have to go to an outside laboratory like Eurofins and set up a study and do tests and then spend a whole lot of money to get to an answer you could have reached a lot easier.
Mhm.
So that's, oh, hey, by the way, everybody, as we're going through this conversation in the chat, if you have questions, of course, but also let us know what groups are you members of? What type of organizations and trade groups out there have provided benefit to you so that we can share that information with each other. So that would be really cool. So one of the groups, Doug, that you're highly involved in and have been very successful in assisting in these type of things, and I definitely want to give a shout out to this group, is the Refrigerated Foods Association. So let's kind of talk about them a little bit.
Yeah, well, this is a member association where the members are manufacturers of refrigerated foods, but not just every refrigerated foods. They really focus on a pretty narrow category within that broader sector. And these would be products that you would see in the deli counter. So,
Mm.
macaroni and cheese, it could be potato salad, coleslaw, all these really comfort kinds of foods that are ready to eat. You pull them out of the refrigerator case, you take them home, and you feed your family, or you go on a picnic and so forth. So, I mean, these are indelible food items that everybody grew up eating. Everybody loves to have these products. But because they are ready to eat and refrigeration is one of the major barriers, they are listed as a category in FDA's traceability list.
Yeah.
And so FDA considers these products high risk. And so I became involved to help them try and navigate best practices to be able to prove to FDA and prove to inspectors, prove to auditors, prove to customers that they have control over their manufacturing process and they have built-in controls beyond refrigeration to make sure that these products are not going to support growth of something like Listeria monocytogenes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of that too then is as we're talking about enhanced traceability in the entire supply chain, and this is something that we're going to, which is a big change in industry. Traceability was one forward, one back, going toward the retailer. FDA has said for these high risk items, ready to eat foods of what we're talking about, you need to be able to trace back quickly to the manufacturer who has those key data elements and those other associated documents that if there is an issue, FDA needs to understand those quickly. So trade associations are looking at, and RFA is great at this, is they are looking at the big picture and talking with their members and saying, okay, guys, what we've been talking about traceability, yeah, absolutely, you need to be doing these type of things, but we also need to be as a group trying to figure out how we're going to manage this traceability back through the system, because there's all kinds of complexities around lot codes and distributors and vendor, all of these things into play. Now, also take into account how are the retailers handling your product. So if you do everything in your supply chain to protect that macaroni salad, and it goes to the retailer and they're putting it in a coffin case that the temperature is not too good, right? All of that work can go to waste, right? So we need to understand the entire chain. I think FDA is right to be looking at these things and bringing that back to the big picture.
Yeah. So, and beyond RFA, I also participate in a number of other trade associations because many of our customers belong to these.
Mhm.
And it's a way for us to not only network with our customers, but it's a way for us to learn more about best practices that the industry is doing so that we can tailor our services to be able to help them with their agenda in terms of improving food safety in a broader market category.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a good point. And so we had touched earlier a little bit about emerging threats. And there's the regulatory piece that we're talking about, where new regulations that FDA has created are coming into play now, and we're starting to see the impacts on industry. And FDA is giving us warning ahead of time. 2026 is coming up pretty quick, so you need to be on the top of those type of things. It's kind of repeating, foreign supplier verification and these type of things that need to be created. And we're seeing in the industry around FSVP, a lot of people didn't pay attention to that because, again, they were siloed and weren't looking at this closely. And as a result, FDA is writing a whole lot of 483s around these categories, and now people are being caught by this. So these things don't go away, and you can't ignore those. And you really need to keep, and I think this is where trade associations are extremely valuable, is new emerging threats. We've all seen in the marketplace, Doug, these new products out there, plant-based meats and cultured fish foods and these type of things, right? FDA put out a paper on this recently as well. Getting a handle on emerging risks and threats is paramount. The analogy I use is listeria. Listeria wasn't really a threat until refrigeration came along. And now all of a sudden, this organism that's been with us forever had this really nice growth opportunity and had a nice little competitive advantage. And nobody saw that coming until those illnesses manifested. And I think we're really seeing that now around these plant-based foods. There's new things out there and new threats that are being identified.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's also a regulatory threat, and certainly Prop 65 brought this to the fore for those trying to sell into California. But FDA has this race to zero on toxic chemicals in foods. And, when you see zero as their goal, that's just simply impossible to do.
Right.
And so everybody in industry who is in that business of handling some of these foods and ingredients where there are residues, everybody's scratching their head about how can we convince the public, consumer advocacy groups, and the regulators that it's not possible to go to zero. I'll give you another example beyond just, and again, when we talk about these elements, it's primarily heavy metals and other related toxins that are found in the soils. The plants or the animals absorb these in those soils. And so depending on where the primary crops are grown, you are going to have a certain set of these crops that are going to be naturally high in things that people don't want to have in their foods. And chocolate, I think, was the latest one that I recall getting splashed all over the news for things like lead and cadmium. Well, when you think about where chocolate is grown, it's grown in less developed parts of the world where leaded gasoline is still used. And the product gets on the soils, gets absorbed into the plants, gets absorbed into the cocoa beans, and you're going to have some of these residues there. Does that mean they're harmful to human health? Most of the time, that's a very difficult question to answer. But we look at what the regulatory tolerance limit is for these chemicals and compare that to what's actually in the product. So if it's below those regulatory limits, then it's not believed that there is any adverse human health impacts. But a consumer advocacy group says, well, I don't want to eat lead in my chocolate, period. Mm-hmm. So there is this headbutting going on between consumer advocacy groups and manufacturers.
Yeah, and so two points on that as well is testing methodologies keep getting better and better. We used to talk about when you're doing chemical analysis of materials, parts per million. Now everything is parts per billion. And that sensitivity and that resolution just keeps increasing on these tests. And something that maybe you couldn't have seen on test results before, when you get your COA back and it says lead not detected. Okay, good. Right now you do the test and you're looking at resolution in the parts per billion. Now all of a sudden it sees 2 parts per billion. Does that mean it's all of a sudden appeared? No, we just couldn't see it before.
Yeah, I want to do a quick survey of the attendees today and pose this question to everyone. How many of you believe that consuming a food with 2,000 parts per billion arsenic is okay? You can just reply yes or no or yuck, whatever you like. So again, the question is, how many of you believe that eating a food with 2,000 parts per billion arsenic is okay human behavior?
Da, 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 da. We'll look at the comments in
So
here.
while people are contemplating and trying to get going on the chat function here, I will tell you that there is no regulatory limit for arsenic in the vast majority of foods.
Yep.
FDA doesn't have one.
Nope. And when you're looking at these, generally what I've done in the past is you're looking at EPA standards for water, because those are the only standards that exist. And Steve brings up a good point here. Organic and inorganic arsenic, one is bad, the other is not for human health.
But we have regulatory limits on arsenic.
Right. So understanding those things is paramount. And part of this as well is as we're having public conversations, and to your point, Doug, there are trade groups and advocacy groups out there that operate from a different agenda than the food industry groups. So if you are a consumer advocacy group, one of the ways that you get new members is by having headlines that say, "Oh my God, lead in my chocolate. Are your children safe?" Right? It's like those, really catchy headlines on YouTube or LinkedIn that get your attention and get you to click. That's how they get new members, right? Is by having those type of messages out there. And this is where regulatory trade groups and associations like we're talking about today can help out as well, because our industry needs to be unified in how we're saying things. Because if one company within a particular sector is saying, yes, these are terrible things, and we pledge to remove all of these because they think it's kind of cool from a marketing standpoint when they really can't do it, and other groups within this industry are having a different message, the consumers are confused. So trade groups help to synthesize that information and make sure that the consumers are getting a clear message, because there's a lot for them to sort through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so thanks for the input here on the question, folks. But I do want to put some context to the question. So FDA does have action limits for arsenic in rice destined for infant food and for apple juice, but not for other food products. And if I'll just share a little piece of research is, because this question was posed to me last week, so that's why I know so much about it today. But it was seafood products naturally have anywhere from about 1,000 to 2,000 parts per billion arsenic. So, when you see a number like that, you go, holy crap, that's a lot of arsenic, but it's 2,000 parts per billion. So even the arithmetic number is large in relation to the mass consumed. It's not that good. So if a regulatory agency says, well, we want a regulatory limit of 20 parts per billion, you have just removed an entire food category from human consumption.
Right. Well, and part of this too, Doug, is how this information is communicated. Is 2,000 parts per billion worse than 2 parts per million? Same number. But which one sounds worse? Right?
Oh, by far and away, we know the one with the bigger number of zeros behind it.
Exactly. And yeah, so part of this is not, I'm using these type of applications in my practice right now, is back on these emerging threats. E-commerce. right? So COVID happened. We're all stuck in our homes trying to figure out how we're going to get food and things like this. And e-commerce started becoming a thing, right? Say, oh, well, we'll deliver food right to your home, and you can sit in your car outside the grocery store, and we'll load up your car for you, and all these type of things. And what happened with this behind the scenes is that channels for the movement of food in refrigerated trucks and these type of things where everything is controlled and sealed and going through distribution channels, poof, that was gone. Now all of a sudden, you've got people delivering food to your house and food coming to your house on UPS trucks, right? Which imagine what the temperature is inside a UPS truck in Tucson, Arizona in the middle of the summer as it's bringing around your package of food that's arriving via the mail. Those channels were not set up for that, and they weren't designed. So does that company that's shipping you that food understand that? And if people are delivering food from the local restaurant to your house, who's delivering your food? Do you know? Do they know anything about food safety or proper handling, or even making sure that it's not being messed with as it's moving through these channels? And if you're at work and that food is sitting on your porch all day long, waiting for you to come home and bring it in, is it going to be okay or not? People looked at these type of things and didn't really think about them. They just assumed, right, from the consumer side that, oh, okay, these things have all been thought of. Maybe not. And this is where associations and groups like this who can ask these questions and help to determine how these things are being managed. I mean, even now going on Amazon and buying products or brands that we like, who's on the other end of that transaction selling you those products? Is it, we all saw this story of a local kid who would go to Walmart and buy a bunch of frozen pizzas and then cook them in his house and deliver them. Who is it, right? Who's doing this? Do they understand these things? They're not being regulated.
Yeah, it's funny you talked about home delivery in Arizona. There is a reason why major brands of chocolate do not do mail order in the warmer months of the year.
Yeah.
It's because they know that chill chain is too difficult to manage, and they have too many consumers being delivered products that are literally melted, and chocolate melts at about 95 degrees Fahrenheit. So that product has opportunities to get grossly temperature abused during shipment, even if they're packed in styrofoam coolers with gel packs.
Exactly. And this is where groups and associations can help you wrestle with these issues, because that, again, goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of our chat today. These conversations are the exact same conversations in your company are happening in other companies too, because businesses are looking for new and creative ways to grow their revenue and their profits and make sure that their shareholders are happy. And they look at this new emerging channel and say, we got to be part of that. Well, there's lots of moving pieces that you may not be familiar with and other people are. So you need to get out there on those type of activities. One of the papers that's out there, a white paper around this topic, that if somebody would like, I can send you a copy. So just hit my email here and let me know that, is there's a guidance document that was put out for direct to consumer and third party delivery. And this was done by the Conference for Food Protection. And there's a giant list of people that were involved in creating that white paper. And probably every single person on that paper who helped contribute to that knows more than I do about the subject. So I want to be able to learn from their expertise and use that internally in my company to help shortcut and accelerate our understanding. Because if you don't, your risk of a recall, you've just really increased that chance.
Yeah, I want to talk quickly about another threat that's out there, and it is for a certain category of food. Again, it's represented by a trade association that I am active in, and there is a real threat of the removal of a primary process control to eliminate pathogens from this product category. And the reason for it is the treatment is fumigation. So it's using ethylene oxide to inactivate microbes in a dry product. And we use these products in almost everything that we eat. Ooh. So there is a huge demand for these products. And because the ethylene oxide treatment facilities are under pressure because they off gas a little bit of ethylene oxide around their facilities, and the local communities do not want these around.
Yeah.
Now, when you gas these products, you need an off gas time period to remove the residual fumigant. So it's not as if these things are unsafe to eat. They're perfectly fine to consume. But the primary thing that you use as your preventive control, that is at risk of being removed from the marketplace.
Wow.
So this is a whole product category that is really worried about what their options are going to be. One of the other options is irradiation. And we all know how much the American consumer embraces irradiated foods.
Right.
They don't. So now you've got two options that may become unviable for this category. Then you're
Mhm.
left with a third option, and that's steam pasteurization. And some of these products cannot be steam pasteurized because you drive off the volatile aroma compounds. And if it's a powder and you put steam into powder, what happens to the powder? It
Yeah.
turns into cement. And when cement dries, what does it turn into? Concrete.
Yeah.
So the product becomes completely dysfunctional after that um, process control treatment.
Right. And piggybacking on that thought, which is a great one, is are your products being sold internationally? Because the rules relative to these type of treatments, if you're going to Europe, very different. And so you need to be aware of these type of things and trade associations. So for example, in the dairy world, USDAC, the United States Dairy Export Council, if you're looking to export your products, you need to understand the regulations in those areas to make sure that you're not going to run afoul of those agencies. So GMO regulations in Europe, as an example, looking at those things and trying to figure out if your products are compatible. Importation, right? Oh my goodness, importation, all the rules around that we could do a whole show around that. It's not as simple as loading product into a container and shipping it over to another country. Not even close. So you need to be aware of those threats as well. So part of this, right, we've been talking about, trade associations and groups that you can join up, but also don't forget groups that impact your company if you're third party accredited, right? So you have the global GFSI, right? The Global Food Institute. And under that standard, you have SQF and BRCGS and all these different companies, right? And you can become involved on that side as well, too. So for example, SQF has a couple of boards that they have. There's a technical advisory council and another one for certifiers. So those companies that are auditing to those standards, so Eurofins, for example, and other companies. And you can become involved on the standard side. They're always looking for input on how to improve their auditing standards and make sure that what's being done is being applied correctly in the facilities, and auditor calibration and all these type of things. There's amazing opportunities there to be involved as well. And of course, SQF and other standards have conferences, and they're always looking for speakers and other people who are knowledgeable in specific areas. And another great opportunity to network and grow your career as well.
I'll give you one other advantage is many of these associations have trade shows.
Mm,
And so it's an opportunity to take one day out of your year, peruse a trade show and vendor shop. It allows
yeah,
you to see, you may have had a relationship that's been very healthy for you for many years with your current vendor. But if they're being a stagnant vendor and not bringing new products to market that can make your life easier, and you don't hear them pitching that to you, now's an opportunity for you to go out and look and see what other people in this competitive business line are doing and see if there might be opportunities for you to be able to do easier or better with your vendor population.
mhm,
At the very least, it also allows you to be able to do an annual price check on what you're paying for your current services versus what might be out there. One big caveat, like everything in life, remember you get what you pay for.
right.
So
And
there's There are plenty of vendors that will sell you something that's a cheap commodity service or product, but what are they going to do for you if that product fails, or the quality specs are all over the place and so forth?
Yep, absolutely. And it's a if you're thinking about a software application for document control or what have you, you can talk with those vendors, but you can also talk with people at that trade show who may be using that system now and say, hey, how did that work out for you? Is it meeting your needs? Is it doing what you require it to do? Or is it crazy complicated? Does it interact well with the other software programs you have in your business? Because a lot of times these programs don't play well together. Is this going to require additional IT time to integrate these into your systems and all these type of things? Talking with people who have no vested interest, just as another user within this field, incredibly valuable.
Yeah, I would imagine there are a lot of people out there right now shopping for a traceability software vendor.
I hope so, right? And this is where trade associations can help as well.
Yes,
Um,
and I'll give you an example. I have a lot of people are asking me, which vendor do you recommend? And
mhm.
honestly, I have no idea. I am completely ignorant on this, and I can guarantee you this is a topic that I personally need to bone up on to be able to provide an answer that's more than, I don't know.
Yeah, and it's a constantly evolving process, and a lot of times there may be relationships that may impinge upon the objectivity of the person providing that information. So they may have a commission agreement or something like this that says, "Oh, okay, if one of your clients buys this software package from you, we'll give you a cut of that business." So is that person going to give you an honest answer? Maybe not, right? It may be the great application and it may be right, but it may not. So being able to cross check and talk with other people and other activities, because from my personal experience, Doug, in the past when I was looking at software in companies for document control or things like this, if you ask the salesperson questions, of course they're going to say, "Oh, absolutely, this is the best thing for you, and you're going to love it," and everything else. And then once you purchase it and it's in the door, it's like, "Well, we do kind of need to modify some code, and well, it may not integrate with this too well." Surprise, right? And now your boss isn't very happy with you for this recommendation because you gave it a glowing review, and the IT guys are pulling their hair out trying to integrate this thing. And one of the things behind the scenes on that as well too is that once they start modifying the program, is that now going to be something that you need to look at for future updates? Because we all know, right, software is constantly updating to meet the next requirement for your operating system. So when those new requirements come out, are you going to have to get with the IT guys to change that program again? And this just becomes a recurring process that everybody grumbles when they hear your name. So you got to be careful on these things. So definitely word of mouth, consumer feedback, unbiased opinions in these type of fields, incredibly valuable.
Yeah, let's see. I got another example for you. uh, 2 or 3 years ago, everybody was shouting blockchain as loudly as they could
Ooh,
as the solution to traceability. I haven't heard blockchain mentioned in a conversation in over a year.
you're right. You're right. Where'd it
So,
go?
yeah,
Yeah, it was supposed to be this magic bullet that would solve everything. Blockchain, poof, you wave your wand and it's complete traceability all the way through the system. Nobody can mess with the records. Well, maybe not, right? Once you start getting down into the details, is how is that done? And are we all agreeing on these type of things? Boy, that's a good point. You're right. I haven't heard anything either. Be very curious, and this is one of the advantages of the food safety chat as well, is that I'd be curious to see if anybody else has heard anything new about blockchain. Um, so Frank Yanis, former FDA commissioner, right now out of that. We'll see if he begins talking about that more because he's been a huge advocate for that when he was at Walmart. So we'll see what happens on that side too, right? Because well, that's an interesting point too, and it isn't. Different people in the food industry, personalities and high-profile figures who are talking and speaking about certain things. How do those impact your business? You need to keep an eye on those things as well. because you could be seeing a very quick turn in those type of activities. One of the things and one of the guiding principles I had is, for conferences and things like this, is the presentations are great and you learn from those. And if I was able to pull one new piece of knowledge out of those, I was happy, right? Bringing that back to be able to continuously improve what I was doing within myself and my company. But it was always amazing. I learned a ton. And this is part of the reason why I do the chat. From the lunch meetings, right? You just randomly sit at a table with a group of different people. And I would do this on purpose. I would sit with people I had no idea who they were. And then you go around that table and say, hi, what do you do? What industry are you in? And you get that cross-pollination, because I can guarantee the people in the meat industry are doing things that have applications in the dairy industry, but our paths normally don't cross. This is a great time to be able to share information. Yeah. So I think, let's kind of bring this back to the 30,000 foot level, Doug, is get out of your bubble, right? I think is kind of the message, what we're saying, right? It's very easy to get caught up in the day-to-day of what we do. You go to the plant, you go to headquarters, you interact, you work with your team people, and then you go home at night and you continue this cycle. But you need to be scanning the horizon. You need to be looking out there to see what threats are coming, what things are changing from consumers, trade groups, regulatory, food safety categories. I mean, look at what's going on right now in infant formula. Tons of activity around this. You need to see these things coming, because if you don't, they're going to hit you and you're going to have to react to those things. One of the things that always makes for a good food safety person, a good quality manager, these types of things, is we're always trying to get from the reactive activities, right? Your corrective actions, to your preventive actions. What are the things that you're doing to see the trends? What are you doing to prevent these things from happening in the first place? And that's the hallmark of someone who's being successful in their career. And you're contributing as well. You're bringing what you're learning to the table and helping others as well. And that reciprocity, again, there's that word, is incredibly valued, and it's going to give you a whole lot of satisfaction in what you do.
I think many of you in food safety leadership positions, you spend, hopefully you do, a lot of your time training your employees, but you spend an equivalent amount of time training yourself.
Ooh, nice. Because if you're coasting, you're going downhill, right? That applies to all of us. So that's a perfect way, I think, to end our chat today. Doug, you're a super busy guy, calling in here from a hotel room out on the road. I just want to say thanks. I appreciate all that you do. I've learned a ton from you, and yeah, thank you.
Always a pleasure, Brian, and good to see everyone who showed up today, and I look forward to the next time.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, we're going to close out the chat for today. And of course, we're live here every Friday. So wow, we're going into April. So we'll be back here next Friday for the next chat. And we'll have another fantastic guest on to talk about food safety and topics. And again, the time, 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern, or anywhere around the world where you may be. Join us, learn a little bit, right? Because growth is always incremental, and join us for a drink. So we'll see you next week. Have a fantastic weekend. Thank you, because just your being here, you're improving and increasing your knowledge. So I want to, and I always like to call this out, thank you for doing that, because food safety is not a point of competition, and we're all in this together as an industry and as a category, right? Everybody eats. So it's very important that we do what we do. So have a great weekend everybody. And Doug, thank you again. See you soon, my friend. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.